Before we get into the episode, there's a minor disclaimer I have to put here. Due to a miscommunication between player and DM, Lune does not wield a katana. Rather, the weapon is a silvered, blade-heavy, hand-and-a-half sword. Now please enjoy the rest of the podcast. Tales of Tel'adar, from the perspective of Lune of Weiss. Chapter 3. The appearance of a new party member, along with the party's departure from Dewvault and trials on the road. After cleaning the bath, I walked back out to the tavern. Thank you, Velmid. I will likely never need to do that again. Velmid simply nodded in response. When I left the pub, I walked to the church. I thought I may as well meet the important figures of the town while we were here. Entering the church of Shantea, I saw a young man polishing something at the far end. I intentionally made it so anyone could tell that I was there, by walking like a human. I started looking around, and the entire building looked like the innermost room of a cathedral. After standing around for a while, the young guy spoke.
There's something I can do for you, sir?
Not really, I was just hoping to meet the father.
Well, he's not—
He was cut off by the heavy clanking of plate sabatons on a marble floor. I turned and saw Grim. Hello there, lad, Grim said as he approached.
Hello there, sir.
The young man said. Where is the father, lad?
As I was just telling this man here, the father is out in the lowlands. Who are these fine folk here? Hello, father. They just wanted to meet you.
We both turned to look down the hall of pews. Walking up was a man in the livery of a priest. Standard black shirt and black pants, but the cuffs and collar were gold and orange, Shantea's colors.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm Father Shepherd. What can I do for you?
The father said. Grim stretched out his hand. Shepherd, you said. I am Grim Shepherd, Paladin of the Light. The father seemed to tense at Grim's words.
A Paladin of the Light, you say? How pleasant.
He turned to Dar.
Dar, could you get us some tea?
Dar walked off hastily, showing a bit of his nervousness.
Well, sirs, what can I do for you?
I just wanted to meet the prominent figures of Dewvault, I said. And I wanted to see the horn of St. Markov. I turned to look at the case that Dar was polishing. Inside the glass was a simple-looking drinking horn on a silk pillow. I remembered the legends of St. Markov, a renowned dragon hunter. Legends claim that the horn will bless the drinker with the knowledge of dragons. It is also said that his bones, being buried under the chapel, protect it from the attacks of dragons. Grim had been talking to the father while I was remembering myths.
Well, I've been getting out much as I can, Paladin Shepherd. I help the farmers in the lowlands by blessing their crops. That way they stay alive during the winter.
Do you think you'd need a hand? Grim asked. We can wreck his protection.
Oh, I don't think there's any need for that. Dar's enough to help me.
I looked hard at Dar, who was now with him. His eyes looked exactly like the Father Shepherd's. Are you two related? I asked.
You have good eyes. Yes, this is my son Dar.
Dar looked at us blankly.
Would there be anything else I can do for you, gentlemen?
The father asked. Grim and I exchanged looks. No, I don't think so. Thank you, sir. As we left, Father Shepherd called out.
Blessings of Shantea be with you.
After leaving the church, Grim and I went back to the scuttlebutt for the night. We awoke at around 11. There was shouting and the distant beating of wings. I ran out of my room. Then I noticed I didn't have my coat on and went back in to grab it. Running out again, I saw Grim. He was only able to put on his breastplate in the small amount of time we had to move. We ran out of the tavern toward the front gate. Once there, we ran into Sergeant David. He was inspecting troops and trying to form them into uniformed lines. All the men in the reinforcement lines were wounded in some way. The farthest back had broken arms and legs.
Form up rank and file. And I said, those with heavy injuries are to go to the back. All able men, come to the front.
Sir, do you need a hand? Grim asked.
All folk are to remain in... it's you. Do you want to help?
I said. I looked at the front linesmen. Finding those that were worse off, I raised my hand to my mouth, speaking a quiet prayer. I stretched out 3 fingers, pointing to the 3 heavily wounded warriors. A wispy cord that looked like concentrated moonlight flowed towards their wounds, and their bandages went slack.
If you want to help, go out and fight,
the sergeant ordered us. We both ran to the front gate. Outside, the palisade was burning, and there were about a dozen kobolds. There was a front line of nervous young guards. Grim walked through them and barreled towards the kobold. I ran around the troops and snapped my fingers while staring at one of the kobolds. The bell of death hovered above his head, and then he shook the spell away. I then ran towards the kobold and threw a knife in his chest. He fell to the ground, dead. I shouted the word for armor and celestial as another kobold rushed me. A brilliant white suit of half-plate covered me as the kobold drew a black blade and took a swing at me. The armor protected me, moving like a coating of water to where the sword connected and repelling it. I then killed the kobold with a single slash. And then screaming was heard from the outer forts. "You should probably run over there and help Lune," Grim called through the melee. "On it." Running over, 8 kobolds came out of the building, swords bloodied. I ran over, meeting 3 kobolds on the way. 2 of them swung and hit me. The last one missed. I barked the arcane word for the spell push, and he flew back 10 feet, burrowing into the snow. Then I was pelted by rocks from the kobolds near the house. 3 rocks burrowed their way into the snow around me. Then the dragon made an appearance. Crackling lightning shot down from the sky and tore a line into the earth beneath. As it approached, I launched myself out of the way by jumping off the 2 kobolds. They were evaporated. Then I noticed that I was bleeding heavily. I was about to power through the pain until I saw Grim running to me. I allowed myself to collapse. As the darkness took over, the sounds of battle were muffled, and I started to dream. I saw my wife, smiling down at me from a tree. She was dressed in white and looked like an angel. Then she faded away and was replaced by Grim. He was positioned above me and was glowing with radiance, and I thought I saw wings coming off of his back. Then sound came flowing back. I threw myself to my feet and slid behind Grim. He had planted his shield in the ground and was facing another force of kobolds. "Lune, could I have the scroll from my back?" I searched and found the scroll. Unfurling it, I found that it was a scroll of destructive wave. Noting that it was a paladin spell, I tried to hand it to Grim. "Just go cast it." I thought that maybe because it was a scroll, anyone could cast it. I darted out in front of Grim and I started calling out the words in the spell. And then I saw demonic script start to cover my body. This was bad. I slinked back behind Grim. "Why did you have me try to cast a paladin spell?" "I thought it would be castable since it's a scroll." The dazed kobold got back up and made a swing at me. He missed again. I again casted push. He seemed to fortify himself, and the force from the spell came back at me, laying me out. The kobold sounded a horn. Everyone retreated, except for the guy I just pushed. He had a look in his eye like he had the power of a god. Grim stepped over me and tried to talk to the kobold. The kobold made an attempt to hit Grim and was unsuccessful. I walked up and tried to stab the kobold to no avail. The line of guards had stopped cowering and were now beside the crevice made by the dragon breath. "Could one of you hit this guy?" I called. At that, 15 spears were launched from behind the crevasse and into the tiny kobold. With that, the battle was won. I walked over and grabbed the knife out of the kobold's chest I threw it into. I then jumped over the crevasse and sat down to ice wounds. Grim walked into the fort and started talking with someone inside. After a few moments, I walked in too to see that he was speaking to a human woman, who had a small cannon of sorts. We all walked out of the building and went to talk to the sergeant. Everything was kind of muffled due to blood loss. All I gathered was that the force of kobolds was substantially larger than all before. Grim and I started walking towards the front gate. I noticed that the stranger with the cannon looked different than all the townsfolk and guards. "Hey, cannon lady," I called out. "You coming with?" The lady jogged to catch up, carrying her little cannon under her arm. We all headed back to the scuttlebutt. The dragon's mighty wings had thrown snow across the town, and now there was a large hill of snow piled up against the southeast area of the town. The civilians that could not fight were now taking care of the snow hills. We entered the tavern, and everything was alive. Not as active as the day before, but it appeared that the battle had woken up the entire town. The scuttlebutt was full of tired people getting drinks and food. Velmid saw us.
"Gentlemen and lady, please come sit. Drinks are on the house tonight."
We walked over to a table and sat down. Velmid walked up to us.
"Can I get you anything, sirs and ma'am?"
He looked closer at the cannon lady.
"Have I seen you before?"
"Probably not," was her response.
"Anyway, can I get you some drinks? Wine? Ale? We could also do something non-alcoholic, like coffee or tea."
"I'll take a tea," the lady said. "Ale," Grim said.
"And wine for you, sir?"
Velmid asked. No, I've lost too much blood to drink. Tea should be fine."
"Blood loss is in from my wound. You were part of the fighting. Well, for those who have given much defending us, I can certainly get some drinks."
Velmid walked off to the bar. Grim turned to the Ken lady. So who are you? Call me Shava, she replied. Grim and Shava started talking together. I could not make out what they were saying and started to slump onto the table. Velmed walked back to the table with drinks. So, what are you doing here? Shava asked. We were hired down from Stormwind, hired to investigate disturbances. Grim started. Sent to hunt a beast. I drawled in. Well, sent to investigate disturbances. There were reports of people missing and some town destruction. We have been sent to hunt and kill the dragon, I whispered conspiratorially. Oh, well, you want some help with that? Shava asked. I stood and drained my tea. It would be nice. Now, I'm going to sleep off a lot of blood loss. I'll see you two in the morning. At that, I walked up to my room and spent some time meditating. Then I went to bed and rested. Waking up, I readied for travel. Throwing everything back in my pack, I hefted it onto my shoulders and strolled out of my room. Upon leaving, I ran into Grim, talking with Johnny, Tommy, and Mark. They were discussing that Belzerin apparently decided to stay in Dewvault. We then met up with Shava and headed off. As we left the tavern, a raven swooped down onto Grim's shoulder and pulled some of his beard out. I called out in beast speech. Hey, what do you do that for?
Screw you!
Came the reply.
Be seeing you, firstborn!
First, we intended to go to the town master, but we were stopped by guards. One was a young soldier that Grim saved. The older warrior explained where another prominent figure lived, namely the Lady Barov. So we started off for her estate. On the way, however, we ran into yet another soldier that Grim rescued. It was the Arasek kid, the young man whose parents ran the stockyard. After going to meet him, Grim was tackled by two older humans.
Thank you so much for saving our son,
the old woman exclaimed.
Please come in.
The elderly man beckoned while Grim was led in by the lady.
Please, take what you want. Everything here's soft price for you.
Really? I asked.
For the man who saved my son and his friends? Of course.
I reached out and their stockbook appeared in my hand. I started flipping through and selecting things to purchase. Purchased 2 crystal focusi. Cost 20 gold. Eventually, after some small talk, we left and kept making our way to the Lady Barov's house until we came across a guy getting hit in an alley. We went down to check it out. It was one of the warriors of the Silver Dragon. Grim started to intervene. Upon closer inspection, it was apparent that the Silver Dragon Knight was being held back from drawing his sword by brambles. They wrapped around his arm and sheath, keeping him from drawing his sword. Insults were exchanged, but it was mostly uneventful, though the knight did call the high elf a drow, which was an insult that I'd never thought about. We then started to head down to the docks to meet the dockmaster. He was a hill dwarf named Harold Ulesh. Besides some normal fraternization and him confusing Grim with Flataxe, the missing dwarf that runs the small cart of magic items in the town, not much important happened. Around 10, we started to head towards the back gate. We entered a hall of buildings. Through the great hall, there was basically a road, and there were miscellaneous markets lining the walls. When we approached the end, there was a stable. The horse I got from Belzerin's fort was there, as well as a chestnut horse that Dar was preparing.
The father told me that you would be here.
Dar approached Grim.
He said if you're going to Allaham, you're going to need this.
He handed Grim a slip of paper. What was this?
It's a thing you'll need to read when you reach the slope into Allaham's rock. Now you gotta be going. The winds on the bridge can knock a full horse off after noon.
As we mounted, Grim summoned Brachiel. We all rode out of the back gate and headed down the road towards Hollowhelm and Krev. We approached the bridge maybe about a half hour later and started to cross. At some point, Shava suddenly had horns and scaly arms. Oh, and wings. Just another misfit like me and Belle the way I see it. Eventually, we were met by another raven. I tried to speak with it and only got screaming in response. It laid 2 cherries in Grim's palm, and then a small stick. And then it flew away and landed on a part of the bridge. We cautiously followed. After getting across the bridge, the bird lifted a rock, far too heavy for an average raven to lift, and then threw it onto part of the bridge we avoided. The section crumbled under the thrown stone. The raven then marked a cryptic message in the snow. It was a line, then another that was half the length of the first, and then a right arrow. We all just kinda stared at the markings for a while. We pondered the strange markings as we traveled down the road until nightfall. We came across what appeared to be a crossroads. We eventually decided that the markings must pertain to this crossing. We took the road to the right. After a little while of riding, we came across an old, dilapidated farmhouse. There was a barn, and it was intact still, so we went to see if we could rest in it. Upon entering, we all noticed a foul stench. There were rotting corpses of animals. Grim apparently saw something at the end of the barn in the haystacks. Shava went to investigate as well. She started pulling haystacks off of the piles and revealed the head of a direwolf. Carefully, she positioned her flamethrower cannon at the mouth of the wolf. As the device started to ignite, the wolf's eyes flashed open and it dodged. The haystacks were ignited. The wolf tried to bite Shava from its bed in the hay. It missed. I shot it from my horse with an eldritch blast. Then Grim hacked it in two, severing the top from the bottom. Then we all noticed that the barn was on fire. Some guy walked in.
What the? Oh, come on! You're burning down the barn I just found for you?
The man was dressed in a t-shirt and a leather vest.
Okay, miss, would you mind hitting that rafter there with your crossbow?
Shava seemed to question her skill when she looked at the ceiling. I'm a rather good shot. Would you like me to try? I asked. She handed me her crossbow and I shot the metal frame. Then part of the roof collapsed and snow fell over the fires, stifling them.
Now, we should rest for tomorrow,
the new guy said.
Oh, and I'm Jonathan.
Wait, are you Tomas's brother or something, right? Grim asked.
Yep, I'm his brother.
He told us to tell you something if we ran into a Moore's ferry, I said.
Yep, a transport of silks. We already have them. Anyway, we should rest up for the night.
Jonathan hauled himself up into the rafters and I threw down my bedroll as far from the dead animals as possible. When we woke up the next day, Jonathan wasn't there. Neither were our horses. Grim was talking with Barakiel, while Shava and I went to start clearing the road with her flamethrower. On our first blast, we found the horses buried under the snow. They were sleeping under some horse coats. They started to wake when we got near. Then we set off for the day. We ran into the Raven again, and he sat on Grim's horse. And in an instant, he turned into Jonathan. What are you? I asked. Jonathan turned to me.
Oh, yeah, I probably should explain that. I'm a were-raven, and I have a bone to pick with you.
About what?
Well, my brother doesn't have his legs anymore.
I saved his life.
And he lost his legs.
The way those tabaxi were carrying him, it looked like he still had his legs.
You started the riot that caused him to lose his legs.
I just dropped the spice. I didn't start the fight. If you're looking for someone to get mad at, find Osama.
You still dropped the spice.
Do you blame fuel or the fuse when something explodes? Undisturbed fuel will do nothing. Fire is what starts the explosion.
He has lost his legs.
And has his life. Jonathan just kind of growled at me.
Anyways, what are you guys even here for?
Hunting the dragon?
Oh, so you want to kill yourself. Wait, what? Really? You guys are going after Big Blue?
Yeah.
You know he just kind of kills things, right? I was traveling with some other ravens, and he just kind of ate them. Like, one bite, they're just gone. Gone. He doesn't need them to eat. He just likes screwing with things.
Jonathan then snapped straight.
Like... Oh no. Hide.
He then turned back into a raven and flew away. We then heard the beating of large, leathery wings. Shava and I commanded our horses to lay down and covered them with snow. Barakiel left and Grim turned invisible. Shava and I dived into the snow and hid ourselves. The massive beast landed.
sovereign home. Have you come to serve me? To lay yourself before my majesty? Or have you come as some blind, foolish, asinine usurper who thinks he may tear down my tower and lay low my scales? One who thinks that perhaps the death at sea is not a death at all. I know your smell. I taste your air. You have come from Dewvault, no? I smell my kobold's blood. I know the filth of combat lingering amongst your fat body and long beard. Do not think I will not return again, dwarf. Once I've found your elf friend.
The dragon flew away in the wake of the long-gone Jonathan. I rose out of the snow to see my horse's throat licked open. I then rode behind Grim, and we put his armor on the back of Shava's horse. We rode through the rest of the day. Barakiel recommended that we ride through the night. We stopped for a minute for the mortal horse. I walked up to it and saw if it could keep going by speaking with it. I felt every aspect of its pain and exhaustion. Grim walked over and cast a spell on it. Instantly it perked up, and we started riding again. Down the road we started towards a plateau. Then, dire wolves leapt out from beneath the snow and started chasing us. There were two. One was chasing me and Grim, and the other one was tailing Shava. I snapped, and the wolf chasing me and Grim heard the bell of death. The wolf staggered and tripped. It started running again, but we had gained distance on it. Grim tried to shoot the beast and missed. Shava shot hers with her crossbow, and landed an arrow through its ear. Grim then slowed Barakiel and swung his axe at the beast. Cutting deep, the blow flung the beast back. I lanced the beast with an eldritch blast, and the wolf flew back into the snow. Shava then used her flamethrower to cook her wolf. It darted this way and that to escape the flames, ending with a wet crunch as it ran into the cliff face. We had made it to the narrow path. After a few more minutes of travel, we arrived at a clearing. Our noses were assailed with the scent of wood fires. There were evergreen trees around us, and a clearing ahead. As we entered the clearing, we saw disheveled houses and a broken barricade on the road. We sent Barakiel and the yet-to-be-named horse off to the woods while we entered the disheveled town. After going behind the small barricade, we saw the rest of the town. There was a large statue that had crumbled on the ground. A bonfire was cooking something foul, and there was a manor surrounded by a moat. Shava walked up to the statue and started investigating it. It had a symbol of Tempest on it, and appeared to be a man in armor. We went to the bonfire and investigated the meat. It appeared to be burnt rabbit. Then we heard a giggle from a nearby house. Turning to it, we heard a foul voice.
"All right, boys, get 'em!"
Arrows flew from the house, mostly at Grim. Almost all of them hit his shield. Then Shava hurled a cannon into the house. It spat fire as it flew and lit the house ablaze. At that, hobgoblins came out from beside the house, and goblins ran out attacking. Again, at Grim. I ran out to one of the hobgoblins. Before he could raise his shield, my silver blade carved through his body. The other hobgoblin readied his bow, and a screaming goblin flew at a larger hobgoblin's skull. His head spun in a half circle, and he crumbled to the ground. I turned to see that Grim was holding his axe like a golf club. Then two female Hobgoblins leapt down from the roof in the burning building. One threw knives at Grim and they just plunked off his armor. The other appeared behind him and Grim turned, looking unamused. Grim cut down the hobgoblin behind him and ran off somewhere that Shava pointed out. He had mounted Barakiel and was riding into combat. As I ran to the new ninja-looking hobgoblin, I saw Grim flying through the air, eyes and axe glowing.
Die!
I approached from behind the hobgoblin and swung. She dodged, only being grazed by the sword. Then I feigned and she dodged the feint, and I hooked her with my blade. She reeled back and then stood again. I readied my blade at her. I smiled. Finally, a worthy opponent. Tales of Tel'adar is brought to you by Alex Peer.
And Luke Warner.
The show is based off of a D&D campaign where Lune of Weiss is played by one Alex Peer, and the campaign is DM'd by
Luke Warner.
All player characters such as Lune, Grim, and now Shava are voiced by Alex Peer.
All NPCs and other folk are voiced by Luke Warner.
If you would like to further support this podcast, then check out Nacho Warlock on YouTube. I stopped doing Twitch. And check out our Patreon at Studio Warlock. For $3, you can get the script to all of these and some reimagined frames from my animations. And for $6, you can pay Luke, because Lord knows I can't. On the Luke tier, you'll wind up getting some stuff that I can't even see, and I'm just going to let him take that.
On the separate tier, you might get to hear things like, wow, this is a really great idea. I can't wait for my friends to definitely respect the monologue I just wrote, and took a whole 2.5 hours to write. And upon finishing, took 3 separate tries in front of the mirror to practice it and get it as perfect as possible. My very good friends will 100% respect the time I put in, care for me, and not simply cast silence on the enemy so that all my time is wasted. They laugh at me and then kill them in one turn, because one of them decided it would be funny.
Someone sounds better. Anyways, if anyone has any suggestions for this podcast, please do send them to me on Twitter. I'll see if I can incorporate them. And if anyone out there is still listening, we here at Studio Warlock would like to say, safe travels and happy hunting.